You ready there, Brad?
Yep.
All right. Yay! No pressure, no pressure.
Am I done?
Who are you and what are you doing here?
Geez, that's what my wife said last week. Took about the same amount of time, too.
So, y'all know the last splitter that I created, just the regular, Adam's got one sitting over there. So I made a limited run of them and wanted to create something a little bit better that had more control over the signals instead of just being X, Y on everything. I wanted to be able to do something like a chase that Adam and I had talked about, and just different things. And I kept looking at different ways to be able to control it. Well, I decided on DMX would probably be the best way because consoles, Beyond has got DMX out and everything else. But man, implementing something like that would have taken me years, just because it's the whole digital side of the circuit and all that, and that's the stuff I don't understand. Well, Polished Ball hooked me up with this guy right here,
And this guy here, for those that don't know, is
Ed Keefe.
E. Keefe on the forums.
An absolute genius when it comes to digital stuff.
Yay!
So we talked last year at FLEM, right outside here about, I gave him my Polished Ball, hooked me up with the guy, and we talked about, I gave him what I thought it should be able to do, and I want to do chases and stuff, with all DMX control. He said, oh, no problem, that's easy. We talked about it here at FLEM. He said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? You know, dual inputs and things like that. And I said, well, why would you want anything like that? It doesn't make any sense. But
That's not enough.
it proved me absolutely wrong. I mean, the effects that you can do is just fantastic. Having two signal inputs as opposed to one signal input. And all the different things that you can do with DMX. So after over a year of working on it, this is what we've come up with, is the EKDZ Advanced Laser Router. So in order to try to make things simple, because it can be very complicated, we have 4 personalities that the splitter can function in. The first being basic splitter, which is exactly like what I sold previously, the 5-channel splitter. You put a signal in, you get it out. On this one, 6 times. It also has a pass-through, so if you have an A input, you got it out on the 6, and then you've got a pass-through. So you can have 7 projectors attached. And one is not, you can't change where it's at or anything with it. It's just a buffered pass-through. So that's the first mode. That's just like my first splitter. The second mode is advanced splitter, and this is what I asked Ed for. This is what I wanted. I wanted to be able to do chases, all kinds of other features and things like that. I'm sorry, let me take a step back. Basic splitter, not only do you have the ability to move the image around with the potentiometers on the front, you've also got gain control, just like the other one. But you can also go into the menu functions here and invert X and Y for the individual outputs. On my first one, you had switches on the back. You could invert X, invert Y. Well, this one you do it from the menu. You also have the ability to swap X and Y. So if you wanted a projector, instead of it being normal sideways perhaps,
Not being on a vertical pole, for example.
from the menu options you can do that. And it'll stay like you power the splitter off, power it back on, it'll always stay that way until you go and make a change, or if you make a personality change or a mode change. The next mode is the advanced splitter, and like I said, it has to do with everything that I told Ed that I wanted, being able to do the chases and all that via DMX. It's got all that in there. Not only can you adjust size and position via DMX of each individual channel, you can adjust brightness of RGB. If you only want one projector to be green, you take down red and blue, and it's all done through DMX commands. Excuse me, DMX. And the next mode is the one input router. This is where things start to get a little confusing and a little hairy. With the one input router, if you had an image that was red, so all 6 projectors are red, but you wanted 4 of them to be green, now you can do that. Now you're rerouting the red signal to green on the projector. And you can do any combination therein. It's got all the same features of the basic splitter mode and the advanced splitter mode, plus the ability to reroute signals coming from the input to the outputs. You can swap X and Y, the whole bit, all via DMX. The dual input router mode takes it a step further. Now we got 2 inputs. Now we can have each output, like we have 1 through 3 be on input A, 4, 5, and 6 be on input B, or any combination therein. Or if you wanted to get really crazy, you can have X and Y coming from input A, RGB coming from input B. Any combination therein. You can have X coming from input A, Y coming from input B to create a really funky abstract. It's kind of unlimited into what you can do and the effects that you can create with it. The color mapping can be the same way. It's not just RGB. You can take red from the input 1 and blue from input 2, all to the same output. So all the outputs are all configurable through DMX. In that mode, there are 108 DMX channels. I think it's 18 per output. And that alone is pretty intimidating and pretty difficult to keep up with if the base DMX address of the splitter is something other than 1. If it's 23, how do you figure out, you want to do this effect, you got to do all kinds of math to figure it out, which is difficult to do on the fly, or if you're programming cues. Well, that's why Ed implemented a external monitor that you can have attached. Now, right now I'm in basic splitter mode, and we can see the 6 outputs, or the 6 projectors that you can have attached. And you can see that X is not inverted, it's in a normal state, Y is normal, and X and Y are not swapped. If I change personality to a dual input router, it's going to do a reset. Now on the screen, it's telling us several things. The first thing it's telling me, the red bar at the bottom says that their interlocks are not satisfied. There's a problem somewhere, and I can look over here and see that input A, I do not have an ILDA cable attached. Input B, I do not. So if I plug those in, they would change to yes, and it's also indicating I do not have a DMX signal. Now this is, each projector has all of these DMX functions. Some of them are from 0 to 255, such as gain and offset in the RGB colors in the RGB mapping. Something such as X source would change it from input A to input B. So 0 to 127 is for input A, 128 to 255 would be input B. And that's how you would reroute a signal from input A out to whichever output you want it to go to, or all of them. There's another feature that Ed implemented that's called RDM. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with RDM.
Yeah.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
If this was to be placed somewhere at a venue, up in a rack or something, feeding projectors way up high, and now that it's up there, you realize it's in the wrong mode. It's an advanced splitter, and you wanted it to be a dual input router. Well, through RDM, I've got an Intech here. I can show anybody that who wants to come up and see it. You can bring up the control program for it. It'll see the splitter out on DMX, and you can change its mode from here without even having to touch the splitter, which is way up, mounted up in a rack somewhere. It also gives you some other information about the splitter. You can name the splitter if you have multiple on the same DMX chain. I think that's pretty much it on a kind of a high level. There's a lot of other features, a lot of menu options that you can go through. I've got a couple of these that describe all of the features of the router. And I think that's about it. I've got a couple cues that I kind of had set up here I was going to show. Just kind of what it can do. So right now I've got everything coming from input A. And so there's all 6 outputs. Now, with that, I can individually go to an output. I've got cues created and beyond that I can go to a DMX channel and tell it I want to invert one of the channels or something to that effect. So I'll take all the channels and invert X. And so now they're all inverted on X-axis. So I can do all that from commands and beyond that are programmed by a Pango script to send out that DMX command to make that change, and it happens very fast. It's on a slow thing. Let me I've also got, like I said, I've got input mapping. I can route any of them to the other input, or I can route all of them. And I've got a command in here to route all of them. I just hit one button and now they've all gone to input B, which is the show that I currently have running. And it can be programmed to where that cue can be one of the projectors, all of the projectors, or any combination in between. And then with a click of a button, have everything move back to the other side. I've programmed a couple chases in here. Color cycling is a feature that you can do with DMX sequencing with them beyond. And it's easy to see how the TOP is changing in the color cycling. And that's changing at the speed defined by the beats per minute and beyond. I'm sorry, that's actually changing by, within the cue itself, I have it defined how fast I want it to go. If I wanted to change that to beats per minute, it's all an ass now.
That's because you're at 562 beats a minute.
Exactly. While that's running, I can add another effect such as a chase. And of course, I'm going 562 beats a minute to bring that down. And this, I've got kind of a two-projector chase going on where it's bouncing between two different projectors. I've got a single that's just bouncing one around. So anything can be created, any type of cues can be defined, and it doesn't have to be run from beyond. You can run it from a DMX console and set up scenes and create chases and everything else. It would all do it. But as you can see, not only is it jumping from one projector to the other, but the color cycling is still occurring as well. And that may be better to see on a different frame. So it's all the same input. I've only got one input going. The other input, as you saw, was the show. Right, so this is just all, I've got one DAC connected going to the router, and the router is handling all the changing of the colors, or even the changing of the positions. I created a cue here that is going to have each output do something different, and I'm adjusting gain or I'm adjusting offset all via DMX commands, so that each one of them is going to do something different. And all that's done with one DAC and the router. And last night we played around with using a MIDI controller to control which outputs were active and whatnot. So with Beyond, it's pretty powerful. There's a lot of stuff you can set up in the cues and all that. You can even see when anybody comes over, it's in the DMX monitor for Beyond, what updates are taking place, what DMX values are changing. But nevertheless, here it is. It's basically ready to go. You guys feel free to come up and take a look at this one, play around with the menu options. Here's some documentation for it. And that's it.
What about sensitivity to loss of DMX signal?
A loss of DMX signal will have it come to a stop whatever the last command received was.
So basically,
it's not going to blank your outputs or anything.
Okay, so
like
at the
that.
beginning of a song, I could sit there and say, okay, well, I want projectors 1 and 5 inverted on the X, and they'll stay that way when I drop the signal. It's whatever command. It's like an EEPROM programming it, and until I send it something new, it's going to stay that way, right?
Correct, but if you lose power, then it's going to come back up and not have that DMX value. So
Understood.
yeah. But, as soon as I plug this back in, it's going to start receiving the DMX again and continue on. So if you lose DMX in the middle of the show, everything's going to stay right where it was until you fix it back up again. It'll tell you, in fact, this will tell you here, and this will tell you here. Right now it says check interlocks because neither cable is attached, but it'll also tell you check DMX, or loss of DMX, because the signal's not there.
Do you take Amex? And how much?
And when? Say now.
Super duper device, email me for details. We've worked quite a bit on price, and as much as we wish we could just make it next to free, the fact is there's so much money into it, and it costs a lot to produce. We've decided we can offer it in two ways. We can offer it as you see it here, with all the potentiometers on the front, or we can remove the potentiometers as well as the knobs, as well as the circuit board and all the interconnects to that, which would take $200 off the price. Just that alone represents $200 in the splitter. Right now, as you see it, it's $14.95. And that's the best we could do.
What about a cheaper case?
We've looked into that, and it's
Are you saying knob rack mount?
No, I'm saying without the fancy engraving. Like last time DZ made a splitter, I bought the cheap plastic front version one because it just goes in a closet, and that's where it would operate. I'll get to a rack eventually, man. I'm just talking about the expensive parts of making the case.
Was not rack mount. Original DC splitter over here.
Yeah.
No,
They've never been rack mount.
You're going to stick with that case for
We've
now.
looked into other cases and stuff, and it doesn't change much unless we find a supplier out there that can do it for a much more reasonable, because the case alone is the single most biggest price tag in the entire thing. The circuit boards are cheap, the components are cheap, but the case itself represents a lot of money.
So 1,500 or 200 minus without the potentiometers.
Correct. Now that gets you, what that gets you is full outputs on everything, and they can't be adjusted unless you did something externally, like built your own little box to adjust X,
They
Y,
can
and
adjust
Z.
it through the software though, right?
You can unless you're in like basic splitter.
Yeah, okay.
What basic splitter mode will do is take all of the outputs, center the offsets, and max on the gains. When you're in any other mode, it just depends on what DMX is telling it to do.
Have you applied for a patent?
No.
You should. You should.
Yeah, you should.
Protect your ass, man.
That, from what I understand, it costs a lot of money to do
5
that.
grand, 10 grand?
No.
Just talk to Bill.
No, you can get.
He's done it once or twice.
Yeah.
This year.
I just don't want to see some Chinese
They will.
person come in here and say,
Well,
oh,
that
I
would be
can't-
hard to protect
now-
the Chinese.
I can't imagine that they would get anything close to it. I mean, the coding that Ed's done, it's fantastic.
Can't you just
Well, you can start by not selling it.
He's got a way to make it to where they can't get anything out of it.